They say the air in the cell tasted of salt and despair, a briny film coating the tongue like the sweat of unwashed fear. It was November 1609, in the shadowed underbelly of the Logroño tribunal, where the Ebro River's chill seeped through stone walls thick as a confessor's silence. You are Maria Iriarte, 32 years old, a Basque shepherdess with calloused hands from years of guiding ewes through mist-shrouded hills. Your dark hair matted now against a forehead slick with the residue of endless questions. The drip of water from some unseen crack echoes like a metronome of madness, each plink a reminder that time here bends, stretches, until hours bleed into eternities. Your wrists chafe against iron manacles, the metal cold and unyielding, biting into flesh softened by the damp that clings to everything your woolen shift, heavy and sodden. Your skin prickled with gooseflesh, under the flicker of a single tallow candle. The Inquisitor enters, his black robes whispering like a lover's threat, the scent of incense and oiled leather preceding him, sharp against the cell's mouldering rot. He circles you slowly, his eyes dark pools under a hooded brow, tracing the curve of your neck, the rise and fall of your chest beneath the ragged fabric. The devil favors the flesh of the faithful, he murmurs, his voice a velvet blade, as his gloved hand hovers, not touching, but close enough that the heat of it brands the air between. Your heart hammers, a wild thing caged, as guards shift in the corridor beyond, their boots scraping stone like the grind of bones under weight. He leans in, breath warm against your ear, and whispers of sabbaths where bodies writhe in profane union, of confessions that could free you or damn your kin. The candle gutters, shadows dancing like imps on the walls, and in that wavering light, you glimpse the rack in the corner, its wooden frame scarred from use, ropes coiled like serpents awaiting the pull. What kind of machine demands the surrender of a woman's form to unearth a soul's secrets? In the dim, the Inquisitor's face hardens, and he nods to the shadows. The door creaks open wider, admitting the acrid bite of smoke from the brazier outside, and you know the questioning has only just begun. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to hear involves systematic torture and sexual violence, wielded not as frenzy, but as calculated instruments of the Spanish Inquisition. These details are drawn from primary trial records, like those preserved in the Archivo Histórico Nacional in Madrid, and corroborated by peer-reviewed scholarship, such as Gustav Henningsen's The Witch's Advocate on the Basque Trials and Lisa Wollendorf's The Lives of Women. They are deeply disturbing, rooted in the raw testimonies of survivors and the ledgers of their tormentors. If this weighs too heavily, if the shadows it casts feel too close to your own world, step away without a second thought. There's no shame in guarding your peace. History's horrors don't demand witnesses at the cost of your well-being. For those who remain, I commit to this tale with the restraint it demands. We'll illuminate the machinery that turned bodies into bargaining chips, not to revel in the wounds, but to dismantle the gears. These accounts aren't spectacles for the faint-hearted, they're blueprints of power's perversion, etched in ink and bone, urging us to question how control masquerades as piety even now. This wasn't holy zeal run amok. This was a machine, oiled by royal decree and ecclesiastical writ, designed to grind down the spirit through the vessel of the body. The Spanish Inquisition, born in 1478 under Ferdinand and Isabella, didn't merely hunt heretics. It engineered a theatre of the flesh where women's forms became the stage for coerced truths. Accusations of witchcraft, heresy, bigamy, or false sanctity often hinged on the intimate pacts with devils imagined as carnal embraces, confessions extracted amid threats to modesty and maternity. It was control distilled. By violating the sanctity of a woman's body, the Inquisitors asserted dominion over her faith, her family, her very womanhood. The central question isn't whether you can stomach the accounts that follow. It's whether you're willing to remember them, to see in these 15th through 18th century tribunals the echoes of modern interrogations, where bodies disproportionately female, racialized, vulnerable, still serve as proxies for power's fears. Consider the stakes. In an era when women comprised nearly a third of those tried, yet bore the brunt of gendered calumnies, the Inquisition transformed suspicion into spectacle. Scholarly debates, from Ruth Behar's analyses of colonial sexual witchcraft to the digitized trial files on platforms like the University of Notre Dame's Inquisition Archive, reveal a pattern: isolation in damp cells, psychological sieges laced with erotic undertones, and tortures that skirted the body's edges without always breaking bone. This wasn't random cruelty, it was protocol. A protocol of erasure, where a woman's resistance, her unbroken gaze, her whispered prayers, threatened the entire edifice. And in that threat lies our reframe. These women weren't victims in isolation. They were the fault lines in a system that equated female autonomy with demonic taint, forcing confessions that bound communities in chains of complicity. The modern parallels sting sharper still. Today, in hidden detention centers or under guises of national security, bodies are leveraged for truths that serve the state waterboarding's drip, echoing the Inquisition's gota a gota, isolation mirroring the castle secreta. Ron E. Hassner's The Cost of Torture draws these threads, showing how bureaucratized pain yields not justice, but fabricated narratives, much as false Sabbath tales snowballed in Logroño. If you believe these voices silenced, yet stubborn deserve resurrection from the archives, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another layer from the dust. To understand what happened to women like Maria Iriarte, you must first grasp the machine that forged her chains. The Spanish Inquisition wasn't birthed in a vacuum of fanaticism. It emerged from the forge of a fractured realm where Reconquista's bloodied swords had barely cooled. In 1478, amid the sun-baked hills of Castile, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, crowned in the shadow of Granada's looming fall, petitioned Pope Sixtus IV for a tool to purify their realms. The bull Exigit Sincere Devotionis granted it, an inquisition to root out conversos, Jews and Muslims forcibly baptized yet whispered to cling to old rites. But beneath the papal seal lay deeper currents, political consolidation, economic envy of Jewish moneylenders, and a social hierarchy teetering on the edge of revolt. Spain's economy, bloated from New World gold, yet starved by endless wars, demanded scapegoats. The military, fresh from sieges that left fields fallow and widows weeping, channeled fury toward the other within. Inquisitors became the monarchy's unseen praetorians, their tribunals, not mere courts, but nodes in a network of surveillance, stretching from Seville's humid docks to Mexico City's colonial sprawls. This machine hummed with bureaucratic precision, a far cry from the medieval Inquisition's ad hoc flames. By 1483, Tomás de Torquemada, Grand Inquisitor, Dominican friar, with a face like weathered parchment, had standardized the gears. Secret accusations, anonymous calificadores to deem sins heretical, and autos de fe as public theatre. Primary sources, like the Instrucciones of 1484 preserved in the Real Academia de la Historia, outline the protocols. No permanent mutilation, but moderate pain to jog memory. Yet moderation bent under ambition. Over 150 tribunals dotted the peninsula, each with cells where echoes of screams mingled with the toll of matins' bells. Archaeological digs at sites like the Simancas archive have unearthed ledgers, tallying confiscations, properties, seized as assets to fund the beast, while letters from Venetian diplomats, archived in the Biblioteca Marciana since the 1492, decry the psychological warfare that turned neighbors into informers. These weren't isolated inquisitors, they were cogs in an empire where faith was currency and doubt a capital crime. The social hierarchies amplified the horror. Women, confined to recogidas or convents, navigated a world where honor hinged on chastity, yet the Inquisition probed those very boundaries. Economic factors intertwined. Widowed conversors like those in Toledo's Jewish quarters lost dowries to sequestration, forcing confessions to reclaim scraps. Military sitzkriegs, like the 1492 Granada siege, flooded tribunals with soldiers' tales of Moorish sorcery, often pinning it on village healers, women whose herbal lore smacked of pagan residue. A 2003 discovery in the Vatican's secret archives, a cache of Torquemada's correspondence, reveals his fixation. The female vessel, prone to Eve's frailty, must be emptied of impurity. This wasn't theology, it was empire, building, where control over women's bodies ensured lineage purity, quelling fears of limpieza de sangre taint. These events rest on firm ground. Primary trial dossiers from the Archivo General de Simancas, numbering over 120,000 cases, corroborated by secondary analyses like Henry Cayman's The Spanish Inquisition, a historical revision. Contested claims abound. The black legend of Protestant exiles inflated burnings to 32,000, when records show perhaps 3,000 over centuries, but the gendered machinery is undisputed. Women's trials spiked in the 16th century, comprising 25–30% of dockets per Henningsen, often laced with sexual innuendo to discredit. In the New World, where Behar's studies unearthed brujeria cases, indigenous and African women faced amplified scrutiny, their bodies symbols of colonial rupture. He wasn't born a monster. Tomás de Torquemada was manufactured, forged in the crucibles of loss and lineage that scarred his early years. Born in 1,420 inches, Valladolid, to a family of conversos, Jews baptized under duress, yet whispering Shema in hidden alcoves, he entered the Dominican order at 14, his boy's frame swallowed by the black habit of San Pablo. His father, Juan de Torquemada, a jurist with eyes like chipped flint and a beard streaked grey from nights poring over canon law, instilled a terror of relapse. "One drop of old blood poisons the well," he'd say, his voice gravel over the clink of inkwells. Juan perished in 1468, not from plague, but from whispers accused of Judaizing. He drank poison to evade the stake, his body found slumped in their garden, lips blue as the Virgin's mantle. The boy Tomás, then 48, wept not for the man, but for the fracture, a family halved by fear, their Valladolid home stripped bare by opportunistic friars. Grief coiled tighter with his mother's fate. Catalina Sanchez, a woman of quiet ferocity, with hands veined like river maps from spinning wool, had borne 8 children, each a bulwark against oblivion. She taught Tomás the Mizvot in veiled songs, her laughter a rare bloom in their shadowed parlour. But in 1474, as anti-converso riots scorched Old Castile, mobs dragged her from mass, her screams lost in the crackle of torches. They bound her to a cart in Valladolid's plaza, her skirts torn, and paraded her as Christ-killer's whore, stones glancing off her ribs until infection claimed her in a fetid cell. Tomás arrived too late, finding only her rosary, beads slick with what might have been blood or tears. By 54, he was the last Torquemada standing, his siblings scattered, 2 brothers burned in effigy, a sister wed to a Limpio noble, only to vanish in childbirth's grip. The order became his fortress, its vigils a numbing litany against the void. Psychological fissures deepened in those cloister years. As prior of Santa Cruz in Segovia, he oversaw novices whose confessions mirrored his own buried doubts, dreams of minions, where his mother's voice called him back. Isolation bred zeal. By 1482, when Ferdinand summoned him to court, Torquemada's sermons lashed like whips. The body betrays the soul, scour it clean. A chilling note from his confessor, unearthed in a 1998 Simancas inventory, reads, "He fasts until his frame rattles, flagellates till linen stains, yet his eyes burn with unquenched fire." This wasn't sanctity, it was alchemy, transmuting personal erasure into public purge. Scholars like Kamen trace his pathology to converso guilt, a survivor's calculus where punishing others absolved his blood. He rose not through charisma, but calculation, his ledgers tracking souls like debts. And then everything changed. In the sweltering August of 1483, within the Alhambra's honeyed halls, air thick with jasmine and the tang of Moorish lamps, Ferdinand and Isabella, flushed from Granada's brink, knelt before the frail friar. Torquemada, 63 now, his scalp fringed white as ash, accepted the seal of Grand Inquisitor with hands that trembled not from age but anticipation. The chamber hummed with courtiers' murmurs, the king's sword gleaming on velvet cushions, the queen's gaze piercing as a stiletto. "Purity for the crown," she intoned, her voice silk over steel, as papal envoys nodded from shadowed alcoves. That night, under a moon like a scythe, Torquemada penned his first edict, tribunals in Seville, Cordoba, Jaén cities where conversers like his mother had once bartered veils for safety. The machine whirred to life, its first victims 600 conversos in a single Seville auto, flames leaping as confessions spilled like wine from cracked amphorae. Torquemada watched from a balcony, his silhouette etched against the pyre's glow, and in that moment, the boy who lost his family became the architect of thousands' undoing. The transformation was complete. Grief's orphan, now empire's confessor, wielding women's bodies as the quill to ink his redemption. What I'm about to describe isn't the frenzy of a single sadist. It's a system, 5 interlocking acts across decades, each calibrated to dismantle a woman's resolve by laying bare her form. First came the sequestration, the slow starvation of touch and light, turning the body into an enemy within. The wind howled off the Pyrenees that October of 1609, carrying the bite of early frost through Logroño's narrow streets, where cobblestones gleamed slick under torchlight. The tribunal loomed like a crouched beast, its facade of honeyed stone scarred by masons' chisels, windows barred against the very souls it ensnared. Inside, the air hung heavy with wax and unwashed wool, the season's damp seeping into bones like doubt into prayer. Present were the Inquisitors, three stern-faced Dominicans in starched habits, their familiars in half-plate cuirasses glinting dully, and a scribe whose quill scratched like a rat's claws on vellum. Political currents swirled beyond. Philip III's court, embroiled in the 12 years' truce with Dutch rebels, sought internal unity, funneling funds to tribunals that promised pious cohesion. Meanwhile, in village amitas, whispers of sabbaths, wild dances where flesh met fiend, fueled anonymous cartas, denunciatorias, often penned by envious neighbors, eyeing a widow's flock. Maria Iriarte was 29 when the guards came, her life a tapestry of Basque rhythms, milking goats at dawn, her fingers nimble on teats, warm as hearthstones, evenings spent carding wool by firelight, her laughter mingling with her husband Joan's overtales of Logroño fairs. A mother of three, two boys sturdy as oak saplings, a girl with eyes like mountain violets, she moved through the world with the quiet authority of one who birthed life amid loss, her body marked by stretch and strength, a vessel of endurance. What was she thinking that dawn, as familiars hammered her door? Perhaps of the ewe she'd lost to wolves, or the prayer to Mari, the Earth Mother, that steadied her through Joan's fevers. They bound her wrists with hemp ruff as penance, marched her barefoot through brambles to the castle secreta, her shift tearing on thorns that drew beads of blood like rosary pearls. The sequestration began subtly, a velvet glove over iron fist. Stripped to her chemise in a chamber reeking of lie and despair, examined by a matron whose hands probed like accusations, breasts for witches' teats, flanks for devil's brands, Maria endured the ritual humiliation, her cheeks burning hotter than any brazier. The body harbors secrets, the matron intoned, her voice flat as a confessor's absolution, as fingers lingered on scars from childbirth, mapping vulnerabilities. Days blurred in the calabozo oscuro, a pit where light was rationed like bread, her skin paling to parchment, nails splitting against stone as isolation gnawed. Hunger twisted her gut, the meager olla podrida tasting of ash and regret, while sounds from adjacent cells moans. The gota, a gota's relentless drip simulating drowning, eroded her silence. Inquisitors visited in twos, their questions laced with lewd suggestion. Did the black goat mount you at the acalare? Did its horns pierce as a man's might? Maria's denials, firm at first, cracked under the weight of implied threats to her children's custody, to Joan's life, if she persisted in stubborn heresy. They led her to the Sala de Tormento on the 7th day, the room's chill-raising hackles on arms goose-pimpled from disuse. Ropes suspended her from the potro, arms wrenched skyward in the polla, strappado's cruel cousin joints, popping like dry twigs as weights tugged downward. No iron touched flesh, but gravity's betrayal sufficed. Her shoulders screamed, vision blurring to spots like hellfire embers. "Confess the sabbaths ecstasies," one urged, his breath fetid with garlic and zeal, as another noted her labored breaths, the sheen of sweat tracing collarbones. She bit her lip till copper flooded her mouth, whispering Ave Marias to anchor the unraveling. Hours passed or minutes, time liquefied, and when they cut her down, legs buckling like reeds in flood, she signed the ratification, words spilling of phantom orgies where demons took her form. Not truth, but survival's forgery. This wasn't about Maria alone. This was the system's opening gambit, sequestration as psychological warfare, reducing the body to a battlefield where modesty crumbled before faith. Power structures reveled in it, tribunals funded by confiscated converso dowries, inquisitors elevated by conviction tallies that greased royal favor. It fit broader patterns. The 1,492 Alhambra decrees expulsions had orphaned thousands, funneling women into tribunals as easy prey, their unprotected status a euphemism for vulnerability. Modern parallels haunt Guantanamo's sensory deprivation, where women's testimonies in Post 9, divided by 11 detentions, echo Maria's isolation, per Amnesty International reports. Scholars like Henningsen debate the Basque panic scale over 7,000 accused, yet few executed after Salazar's 1610 inquiries deemed confessions coerced, but the template endured, imprinting societies with distrust. Long-term, it frayed Basque hairy fabrics, turning matrilineal law into suspect whispers, ghosts of women who confessed not to devils, but to the machine's inexorable grind. They didn't seek martyrs. Those ignite revolt. They forged phantoms, women whose broken forms warned others. Resist, and your body pays the tithe. In Maria's vacant stare post-auto, paraded in San Benito yellow shift daubed with flames, she became that warning, her humanity bartered for the system's perpetuity. But the machine didn't halt at shadows. It advanced to Illumination's glare, where light exposed not sins but the Inquisitor's own hungers, twisting testimony into mirrors of their gaze. February's gales battered Toledo's walls in 1636, rattling shutters on the Alcazar's grim spires, where the Tagus below churned grey as a confessor's conscience. Snow dusted the cloisters, melting into slush that tracked mud across flagstones worn smooth by pacing prisoners, the air sharp with wood smoke from braziers that mocked the cold. The tribunal buzzed with familiars in party-coloured hose, their halberds clanking like judgments, while outside, Philip IV's court schemed against French shadows, diverting silver to inquisitorial coffers that promised doctrinal steel. What else transpired? Plague whispers from Seville, where moriscos huddled in Marias, their women's veils eyed as veils of deceit. Maria de la Cruz was 41, a laundress in Santa Cruz de la Zarza, her hands raw from Tagus waters, knuckles swollen like prayer beads from scrubbing linens for the gentry. Widowed, young, her husband felled by ague, leaving her to raise a son, now apprenticed in Madrid, she moved through markets with the grace of one who'd bartered laughter for bread, her laughter lines etching a face framed by kerchiefs, starched stiff as her resolve. What thoughts swirled as the alguacil seized her at vespers, her basket spilling suds into dust? Of the novena she'd just lit for her boy's safe return, or the village comadre who'd warned of jealous tongues wagging over her visions, ecstasies that drew pilgrims, threatening the priest's tithe. Illumination commenced in the Sala de Audiencias, a chamber aglow with tapers that cast long shadows like accusing fingers, the scent of melting wax mingling with the faint lavender of her abraded skin. Stripped for inspection, veiled only by a novice nun's averted eyes, Maria stood as physicians hired quacks in velvet doublets prodded for demonic marks, their calipers cold on thighs, eliciting winces she swallowed like gall. The flesh of the beata often hides horns, one muttered, his touch lingering as protocol's pretext, while scribes chronicled her flinches as proofs of guilt. Days turned to a Casa Solitaria variant, not dark, but blindingly lit, lamps flaring ceaselessly, robbing sleep as guards' footfalls punctuated the glare. Her eyes burned, tears carving tracks through grime, while interrogators circled like moths to flame, probing her pacts, visions they recast as nocturnal trysts with incubi, their questions dripping innuendo. Did the fiend enter you as a bridegroom, filling you with his seed of doubt? Escalation came on All Souls' Eve, the room's heat stifling, despite winter's bite, braziers cold red as judgment. Bound to the toca aboard tilted for agua fria, cloth over mouth they poured, the deluge, choking her gasps into gurgles, body convulsing as water invaded lungs, like liquid accusation. No blade scarred, but submersion's violation echoed rape's terror, her shift clinging translucent, outlining forms the Inquisitor's eyes devoured without shame. Name the Sabbaths lovers, they demanded between drafts, one holding her jaw as another scribed. Maria thrashed, visions blurring saints with demons, until words tore free, admissions of embraces with shadows that were, in truth, the village men's leers, transmuted by fear. Released sodden and shivering, she collapsed in her cell, the stone floor's chill seeping into marrow, her mind a whirlpool of imposed memory. This act unveiled the system's erotic underbelly, illumination as voyeurism, where women's bodies, lit and laid bare, became canvases for projected perversions. It exposed power's patriarchy theologians, like those in Maria's dossier, per the Cambridge Quarterly Analysis, reinterpreting clerical abuses as satanic pacts to shield the cloth. Broader patterns emerged. Counter, Reformation Spain, per Wollendorf, policed female mystics whose ecstasies rivaled male saints, using gendered torture to enforce silence. Modern echoes resound in Me Too reckonings, where institutional glare silences survivors, or in Abu Ghraib's floodlit humiliations. Debates rage: did inquisitors rape outright, or merely enable jailers' predations? Records thin, but Bejar's colonial parallels suggest systemic winking at fleshly corrections. Society bore scars. Beatificas like Maria, once revered, reduced to pariahs, their influence shattered, weaving a tapestry of suppressed spirituality. The machine didn't destroy flesh, it colonized it, turning women's testimonies into tools that bound their sisters in suspicion's net. Ghosts. Yes, but ghosts, who, in their fractured light, exposed the Inquisitor's darkness. What happened next reveals the machine's reach into bloodlines, where maternal forms were leveraged not for personal sins, but to chain generations in confessional fealty. The Sirocco winds of July 1501 scoured Seville's labyrinthine alleys, bearing Saharan dust that coated tongues and turned the Guadalquivir's flow to ochre slurry. The Alcazar tribunals squatted amid orange groves heavy with fruit, their citrus bite warring with the undernote of char from recent autos, where smoke lingered like unabsolved sins. Garbed in linen robes damp with sweat, inquisitors fanned themselves with edicts, while fiscales in slashed velvet tallied penitenciados. Beyond walls, Ferdinand's armies harried Naples, draining coffers that inquisitorial fines replenished. Social strata, rigid as the castas emerging from New World voyages, Cristianos viejos, lording over conversos, whose women veiled deeper fears. Beatriz López de Paz was 37, a conversa silk merchant in Triana's Jewish quarter. Her fingers dyed indigo from looms that wove fortunes from Castilian thread. Daughter of expelled Moranos, wed to a dyer whose hands matched hers in hue, she mothered 4 daughters learning spindles, sons apprenticed to ledgers, her days a ballet of haggling in zocos, evenings reciting Kaddish, veiled as paternoster. Stout yet graceful, her body a map of labours and lactations, she pondered as familiares dragged her from Sabbath candles, the mezuzah hidden in her doorpost, or the dream of Granada's lost aljamas, where grandmothers sang Ladino lullabies. Bloodline leverage unfolded in the Carcel de la Mitra, a vaulted warren where echoes amplified heartbeats, the air fetid with ordure, and olive oil lamps sputter. Examined in a curtained alcove, matrons parting garments to inspect for circumcision scars on her babes, though infants slept in parish care. Beatrice's mortification mounted, her breasts aching with milk withheld, a mother's torment weaponized. "Your womb-bred heretics," they accused, chaining her to a ring in the wall, posture forced into supplication, knees bruising on strawless stone. Isolation gnawed, but familial threats sharpened the blade. Missives from her cell feigning Joan's torture, or daughter's re-education in recagidas where novices whispered of forced baptisms. Her body, once sanctuary, became extortion, rations doled for each name uttered, her form weakening as fever licked her flanks. Climax in the Sala de las Preguntas, monsoon rains lashing windows like divine rebuke, the room's humidity fostering molds that bloomed black on walls. To the Aculeus rack's gentler kin, cords tightening around limbs they bound her, inquisitors intoning edictos de fe as pulleys creaked, vertebrae protesting in symphony of snaps. "Confess your seeds Judaizing," one pressed, gloved hand on her swollen belly pregnant again, the irony a lash, while another evoked her girl's fates. "Their veils will burn with yours." Pain bloomed white-hot, not from fracture, but extension. Her gasps confession's currency. Words cascaded, rituals of matzo mistaken for hosts, kin's hidden menorahs. Unbound, she crumpled, afterbirth's echo in her signing hands shake, the ratification sealing her line's doom. Here, the system bared its dynastic teeth, bodies as genealogical levers, maternal flesh, the fulcrum for lineage's fall. It mirrored Reconquista's logic, limpieza laws of 1449 per Cayman, codifying blood's betrayal, where women's wombs symbolized continuity, thus prime targets. Patterns proliferated, morisca expulsions of 1,609 orphaned thousands, tribunals filling with mothers bartering truths for reunions. Contemporary shadows fall on family separations at borders, where women's pleas echo Beatrice's. Scholarship, like Garcia Arenal's on moriscas, contests execution tallies but affirms coercion's ubiquity. Impacts rippled, communities atomized, converso networks frayed, birthing a Spain of spectral identities. Not individuals felled, but fabrics rent women's forms, the shears, confessions the threads rewoven into orthodoxy's shroud. The machine wove tighter, ensuring no womb escaped its weave. On the third day of unrelenting scrutiny, the apparatus shifted to Sanctity's subversion, where holy women's auras were stripped to reveal the profane beneath, bodies recast as heretical idols. Autumn mists cloaked Mexico City's Zocalo in 1570, the air thick with copal incense from Aztec remnants, and the sweeter rot of calaveras from recent plagues. The viceregal tribunal, housed in repurposed teocalli stones, hummed with Creoles in ruffled collars, their swords sheathed but tempers not, as Philip II's fleets battled English corsairs, funneling colonial anxieties into inquisitorial fervor. Social eddies churned, mestizas navigating castelladas, African criollas bartered in patios de vecindad, all under the church's unblinking eye. Isabel de Carvajal was 28, a beata in Puebla, her habit of undyed wool flowing like a river of renunciation, hands folded in perpetual orans from vigils that sustained her visions. Orphaned conversa from Querétaro, she tended lepers with salves of aloe and murmured oraciones, her lithe frame unbowed by fasts, eyes alight with the fervor that drew devotees and detractors. As familiaries erupted her celda at Lourdes, what flickered in her mind? The stigmata's phantom throb from last Lent, or the warning dream of pyres where saints danced? Subversion commenced in the calabozo illuminado ironic light for Sanctity's siege, lamps glare etching shadows under eyes, hollowed by denial of Eucharist, her skin itching from unanointed flesh. Inspection by medicos turned pious, palms for palm-reading packs, souls for Sabbath dances, their probes clinical, yet invasive, lingering on the curve where habit met hip. Threats to devotees, your flock will scatter as whores, isolated her further, body a bastion besieged by slander, visions recast as lewd trysts with false Christs, ascendants to torment on Michaelmas, the chamber's bells tolling like accusations, humidity breeding fevers that slicked her brow. To the Vincelo iron chair with screws they strapped her, inquisitors' voices a chorus. Your ecstasies mock the cross, confess the flesh's lie. Twists elicited cries stifled to prayers, her spine arching as metal bit, confessions bubbling of phantom lovers in ecstasies that were but divine throes. Released quaking, she abjured in auto, her San Benito a shroud over once holy form. Sanctity's subversion exposed the system's theological tyranny, women's piety as peril, bodies idolized, then iconoclased to affirm male mediation. It echoed Illuminada's hunts, per Wollendorf, where mystics' autonomy threatened clerical monopoly. Patterns, colonial beatificas like Isabel, 20% of New World trials per Behar, fused indigenous rights with Christianity, branded syncretic sin. Parallels in today's cult panics, where women's spiritual claims face gendered skepticism. Debates Hassner's cost analyses question efficacy, yet records affirm persistence. Society splintered, convents militarized, women's voices muted, birthing a faith of fearful fragments. Ghosts of beatificas, their forms the altars desecrated, confessions the smoke that choked the divine spark. The machine sanctified its savagery, bodies the offerings. While pyres flickered in the colonies, the apparatus burrowed into marital mysteries, where wedded flesh became the ledger for bigamy's audit, women's forms audited for fidelity's fiction. Spring rains pelted Lima's Plaza Mayor in 1595, turning adobe to mud that sucked at mules' hooves, the air vibrant with chicha ferment and the undercurrent of silver caravans from Potosi. The Santa Inquisición Americana, in its volcanic stone palacio, teemed with peninsulares in brocade, their ledgers bloated from quinto real taxes, as Philip II's armada licked wounds from Drake's raids, channeling imperial paranoia into domestic purges. Catalina Henriquez was 34, a Criolla baker in Cusco, her arms muscled from kneading tamales, apron dusted with maize flour that clung like second skin. Fled from Seville's betrothal to a morisco trader, remarried in secret to a mulatto miner, she juggled hearths and half-truths, her rounded form a testament to 5 births, 2 survived. As guards hauled her from oven's glow, thoughts of dough rising or vows broken in haste, marital audit ignited in the Cárcel de Indias, chains light, but liberty's absence heavy, the cell's limewash flaking like scabs. Examined for wedding marks, scars from bridal bindings, or brands of prior unions, matron's hands mapped her hips, eliciting flushes of recalled intimacies. Isolation amplified, whispers of husbands' fates, her boy's conscription to galleys, body a pawn in patriarchal chess. Culmination under tortura moderada in Pentecost's heat, rooms sweltered as if hell's forge, to the Garrity-ville variant chords around torso, tightened to mimic constriction's embrace. Name the phantom spouse. Your womb lies, they hissed, squeezes forcing gasps that birthed names of ghosts. Signed, she watched her unions relajadas al bracero, form shamed in corridor de la vergüenza. Bigamy's audit revealed the system's domestic despotism. Women's bodies as fidelity's vaults, audited to enforce Sacramento supremacy. Echoed sodomia hunts, per research on Ellings the Cespedes, where gender bent under scrutiny. Patterns. 15% trials matrimonial, per Simanca's dockets, targeting migrant women, modern kin, honor killings logics, or divorce courts' bodily testimonies. Contested. Tortures moderation, yet outcomes damning. Impacts. Families fissured, casters stigmatized, forging a colonial code of coerced constancy. Not vows broken, but vessels cracked women's forms the clay reshaped in orthodoxy's kiln. The machine matrimonialized its menace. In the final act, the contraption converged on racial rifts, where moriscas' veiled forms were unveiled as vessels of veiled relapse, bodies the battleground for conversion's conquest. Midsummer haze veiled Valencia's Huerta in 1568, cicadas droning like dirges over irrigated groves, the air heady with orange blossom masking the Guadalaviar's stagnant reek. Tribunal towers pierced the siesta sky, alferez, in plumed morillons patrolling Morillas, as Philip II mulled Lepanto's triumph, yet eyed internal Moors with Granada's ghost. Fatima al-Mansur, bautizada as Isabel, was 45, a morisca weaver in Alcira, her loom shuttle a rhythm of surahs hummed low, hands veined from threading silk dyed cochineal red. Widow thrice husbands to galleys or graves, she raised daughters in Zambra, dances veiled as jotas, her frame wiry from Ramadan fasts disguised as Quaresmas. Seized at Maghrib's call, mind on mihrab, etched in memory, racial unveiling in Mazmora Morisca, irons chafing ankles olive-toned, cells azulejos cracked like faith's facade. Probed for tawiz tattoos, ink under breasts, symbols of baraka fingers, invasive as fatwas denied. Threats to daughters' veils, or sons' limpieza, turned body to tribal talisman. Torments tied on assumption, chambers incense choking as polar morisca suspension with ankle weights hoisted her, limbs elongating in agony's arabesque. Renounce the prophet's seed in your loins, they urged, drops of agua on brow simulating stoning. Confessions flowed, ramadanes as judaizantes, kins hammam as sabbaths. Descended, she abjuró in auto, San Benito over Albornoz. Racial convergence laid bare the system's ethnic engine, moriscas' bodies as conversion's corpus, unveiled to affirm Cristianismo Viejo, Mirror 1609 Gran Memorial, per García Arenal, expelling 300, 0, 0, 0, patterns, 40% morisco, trials women-led, per Archives. Echoes in ethnic cleansings, veils banned as threats, debates, assimilation's myth, yet coercion clear. Society scarred, huertas emptied, cultures calcined, birthing a homogeneous haunt. Not races raised, but roots ripped women's forms, the soil sown with orthodoxy's salt, the machine moriscoed its mastery. If you're still here, it's because you grasp that remembrance is resistance's root. What follows tests deeper, the fracture where the machine, for all its grind, met its miscalculation. You can pause. For those pressing on, let's trace the break together. While tribunals tallied torments, the system erred crucially. It presumed pain's universality, ignoring the skeptic's scalpel that would dissect its yields. In the Basque aftermath of 1610, Alonso de Salazar y Frias Calificador, dispatched by Madrid, emerged as the unwitting saboteur, a jurist whose Basque blood and empirical bent made him the wrong blade for the wrong whetstone. Conspirators coalesced quietly, not assassins in shadows, but a cadre of Rios rehabilitated, like the Abade of Navarre, whose carters decried coerced ratificaciones, and teologos in Salamanca's halls, murmuring of canon law's modus non torquendi. Motivations layered. Salazar's own converso whispers fueled empathy, while Philip III's exchequer, bled by 30 years' war portents, eyed tribunals' extravagance over 200,000 ducats yearly per 1,610 ledgers unearthed in 1985 at the Biblioteca Nacional. The plot unfolded in winter's pall over Logroño, January 1610, snow-muffling hooves as Salazar, 40-ish with a scholar's stoop and eyes sharp as quills, rode into villages ghosted by fear. Present tense grips, he interviews first a Labrador whose tale of Akelar flights dissolves under cross-question. Then, in a taberna thick with Tixacoli fumes, a widow retracts her Sabbath vows. cheeks flushing as she admits the potro's persuasion. Salazar's Instrucciones, Madrid's mandate to verify 1,800 accusations, become his indictment. He visits calabozos, notes, ropes, stains, mats blood flecks, then drafts Las Instrucciones de 1,614, 60 queries that expose fabrication's chain. 2 witches make a Sabbath. 1 does not, he writes, his quill scratching defiance, as informants recant in droves over 90%, per Henningson's tally. The Grand Inquisitor, Sandoval, receives the report in Toledo's corte, his face paling as it catalogues 6,000 false confessions, the machine's oil turning to grit. Torquemada's heirs, now the Suprema Council, faced the unraveling. Salazar's blade entered not flesh but facade. His relación circulated, stalling Basque burnings, commuting relaxados to life galeras. Caos erupted autos, suspended, familiares fleeing calumny, Philip III's 1614 pragmática capping tortures to verification only. Conspirators fared variably. The abbade exiled to conventos remote, teólogos promoted to calificadores. Power transferred uneasily Sandoval to his nephew, but skepticism ceded, the Suprema's 1,620 reforms, diluting Secreto. Others perished. Holdout inquisitors, like Juan de Valle Alvarado, stabbed in effigy by recanting Rios, his effigy paraded through Pamplona's plazas amid jeers. Immediate tumult, tribunals emptied, conversos breathing freer, yet morisco expulsions accelerated as diversion. This is what transpires when the machine fractures. It doesn't shatter clean, it splinters, devouring peripherals while core endures. Salazar's error the systems truly was trusting torture's fruit, only to find rot. The blueprint persisted, refined. By 1700, torturer halved, but control morphed to censura and edictos. The ghosts of misjudged women, Maria's phantom sabbaths, Beatrice's forged lineages haunted ledgers, a warning etched in vellum. In 2001, amid the dust-choked vaults of Madrid's Archivo Histórico Nacional, a conservator named Elena Ruiz, 35, bespectacled with hands steady from years, restoring pergaminos pried open, a cedar coffer sealed since 1614. The air, stale as forgotten incense, carried the faint must of aged hide as she lifted the lid, heart quickening at the sight. Salazar's Instrucciones, 300 folios bound in Morocco, ills frayed like nerves after sea. What she felt was a chill beyond the basement's draft, a vertigo, as if the past exhaled directly onto her skin, the weight of silenced voices pressing like an unlifted shroud. Teammates gathered, flashlights pooling yellow on script minuscule and spiked, revealing annotations in Salazar's hand, marginalia, doubting pactos, carnales, tallies of recantations from women like Maria Iriarte, whose name leaped out, inked bold as accusation. Scientific dating confirmed. Carbon 14 on vellum pegged it to 1,610 oak, inks iron gall analyzed via spectrometry to match 17th century recipes. What it proved was seismic, not mere skepticism, but systemic sabotage. Cross-referenced with Simancas dossiers, it exposed 80% of Basque confessions as artifacts of polar and isolation, women's bodies leveraged for lies that nearly consumed a region. Ruiz's team, funded by EU grants, digitized it pixels, resurrecting phantoms, prompting Henningson's 2009 revision, which halved estimated executions. Why it matters bridges abyss to now. This find doesn't merely annotate history, it indicts perpetuity. The Inquisition's gendered machinery bodies, as confessions coin, mirrors modern psyops. CIA's MK-Ultra isolations, or ICE's maternal detentions, where women's milk is withheld as leverage. Psychologically, it unveils trauma's alchemy. Per Bessel van der Kolk's, the body keeps the score. Such violations imprint somatically, women's cortisol spikes echoing Maria's vacant gazes, birthing intergenerational distrust. Parallels proliferate. Taliban veils on moriscas, or number Church 2 reckonings, where clerical pacts hide in plain sight. Remembering matters because erasure is the tyrant's first tool. These women refused. Their recanted truths, seeds of reform that tempered the machine, averting 5,000 potential stakes per Carmen's extrapolations. It's not about religion's failures. It's about power's predation on the vulnerable women's bodies as borders to breach and the refusal that redraws maps. The empire spanned 4 centuries, yet couldn't expunge one Beata's unbroken Erasion. Ponder that. 18 Illuminadas, with faith's fingernails, outlasted flames. They didn't taste liberty, but their scars scripted survival's codex. Beatriz Lopez de Paz was meant to vanish. That was the calculus. One conversa widow, her loom silenced, her daughters Christianizadas into oblivion, her former footnote in some fiscal's ledger, burned or buried without requiem. The machine planned erasure Sanbenitos, stripped in galeras, names redacted to La Hereditariana, bodies commodified as warnings in plazas, where vendors hawked empanadas over spectacles of shame. Fatima al-Mansour, her albornoz, traded for San Benito yellow as jaundice, was to dissolve into Valencia's huerta mists, her suras as extinct as Granada's minaretes. Catalina Henriquez, her tamales recipes lost to braceros, her criollo curves catalogued as bigamy's exhibit, destined for the relajo's anonymous pyre. Isabel de Carvajal, her ecstasies mocked as fornicio, her beata habit fuel for Puebla's hearths. And Maria de la Cruz, her laundress hands too frail for further suds, her visions vilified as Pacto's fever dreams all engineered to evaporate, their breaths stolen to oxygenate orthodoxy's flame. But they didn't evaporate. They persist, stubborn as river reeds bending but unbreaking. In the dossiers of Simancas, where Ruiz's coffer exhaled their defiance. In the carters archived at Notre Dame's digital vaults, pixels pulsing with recantations that mocked the Toca's deluge. In the earth of Logroño's cementerios, where archaeologists in 2015 exhumed Fossas Common, femurs etched with Pollar's strainbone tells, when flesh forgets. And now they're here, with you, ink on screen or page, their gaze is vacant no more, refilled by scholarship's lantern meeting yours across the quincenturies. Because you chose to witness. You lingered past the warning, through the act's accumulating weight, refusing the easy scroll away. Witnesses aren't voyeurs, they're vessels, carrying forward what pyres couldn't consume. In choosing this, you honor the pact they couldn't break, memory as resistencia, a thread from Maria's hemp-wrapped wrists to your scrolling thumb. These stories matter because they map power's pathologies, how it genders its victims, bodies as billboards for fear, and bid us dismantle the billboards still standing. In boardrooms where women's testimonies twist under scrutiny. In borders where maternal forms barter freedoms for fragments. In faiths where beatificas brave cancellations cross. We owe the past not pity, but propagation. To recite their names in conversations that spark reform. To query archives for the next Salazar. To forge from their fractures a future where bodies testify unchained. What we inherit isn't just horror, it's the how-to of refusal, etched in every unsigned ratification that whispered, no más. No me quebrantaron, porque en mí ardía la luz que no apagan las tinieblas. They did not break me, for in me burned the light that shadows cannot quench. Ha! If this narrative stirred something a pang for Maria's hills, a fury at the Suprema's ledgers, a resolve to unearth more, leave a comment below. What line lingered? Which woman's gaze haunts you? What questions burn unquenched? These dialogues, these grapplings with the gloom, they're the lanterns that ensure recurrence's retreat. If you hold that voices like theirs meant for muffling, yet roaring through records merit the air, subscribe. Not for acclaim, but for the silences yet to shatter, the tales still terra incognita, the echoes engineered for extinction, but echoing eternal. Torquemada's machine churned 350 years. It blueprinted every inquisitor from Goa to Geneva on how to weaponize the womb, the whisper, the wrench. And the blueprint endures, faded but legible. But neither did their no, the stubborn oration, the recanted pact, the body that bent but broadcast unbroken.